Keir Starmer is opposite me in the studio. I have to tell you, Sir Keir, it's going to be a lively one. Normally, as you're taking your seat, the calls are coming. It's absolutely full, and we're going to get going. That's a rueful smile. I don't know where we're going to go with them all, but before I allow anybody, obviously, thank you. Good to see you again. I trust all is well in your world with your family and everything else. Yeah, good to hear. Got to put you the front page of, I think, at least 4 stories today. Ending the Channel migrant crisis. People to be turned back. It could win the election, says one newspaper, the Daily Express. This is a fairly radical plan that I think we're all going to learn a lot more about tomorrow, but I guess you've formed a view already. Sir Keir?
Yeah, well, look, Nick, the problem has got to be dealt with. The crossings of the Channel, nobody should be making that crossing, and we absolutely have to deal with it. So on that issue, we're very, very clear. I've always said, in the end, the only way to deal with it is to break the criminal gangs that are driving this. They've been driving this as a vile trade, making huge amounts of money, and they've got to be broken, which is why I've always said we should beef up the National Crime Agency. They can work cross-border with a specialist unit to deal with this. That would be the first thing I would do. But also, for heaven's sake, speed up the processing, because the number of... If you take the 2021 crossings across the Channel, only 4% of them have been processed, if you can believe it. And for last year, it's about 1%. So those are the 2 things I would do. What I would say about this legislation, Nick, is...
Yeah, I'd like a word on that specifically.
Yeah, you've just read me the headline. Let me... Because I thought this might come up. In April of last year, we had legislation, and the government said, and I quote, it would break the business model, it would end illegal migration. So that was precisely 12 months ago with the legislation they were proposing to pass and did pass then. And what's happened since? The numbers have gone up. So I don't think going on with this sort of legislation is the way forward. Why not put the money and the resource into the National Crime Agency and break the gangs who are running this? Because until we break them, I think it's going to be very, very hard to actually deal with what is a very real problem, which is people crossing the Channel in the way that they are.
Back to that idea of the NCA in a moment. Just lastly, reminding my listeners, of course, you have extensive experience in the field of human rights. Can I ask you, is it even doable, what they're proposing, legally?
I don't know that it is, Nick, and I think we've got to be very careful with international law here. I think it runs into this problem, and it is a real problem. What happens the moment you get an Afghan who has arrived in this country having fled the Taliban, and let's say, for sake of argument, that person helped the British military in Afghanistan, maybe an interpreter or other people who were...
Wouldn't he have had, or she had access through the former plan, though, wasn't it? I thought we were meant to bring those...
Well, the problem with that plan, if you remember, was in the summer of year before last. There was a plan to get people out at speed, and all of us had this experience. We all know, because we were working with these, all of our caseworkers were working with people who got stuck in Afghanistan because they didn't get out before that last plane went out, if you remember. It was a terrible time. Because
I know
there were
MPs have worked for relatives.
And so I don't know, this isn't a workable plan. And that's the problem. We had a plan last year which was put up in lights. It's going to be the election winner. These bits of legislation always seem to come when we've got a local election coming up. It was going to break the gangs. It didn't. But now we've got the next bit of legislation with almost the same billing. I don't think that putting forward unworkable proposals is going to get us very far. We need workable proposals. And we've got to break the gangs, because
Indeed.
These gangs are running it.
Yeah, you're confident that beefing up, to use your words, beefing up the NCA, that would achieve what everybody wants to do, is to stop people possibly drowning in the middle of the Channel. Nobody wants that.
Yeah, Nick, and I'll tell you why. Because when I was Director of Public Prosecutions, I worked with cross-border gang enforcement models that were dealing with drugs that were crossing borders, with guns that are crossing borders. We need the equivalent for people who are being driven through these smuggling groups, and actually go to the source. Because the other thing that will happen if we're not careful is these gangs, if they're not broken, will just change, and it will be back to a discussion about lorries or something like that. And so you've got to go to those that are making the money out of this criminal activity.
Thanks for that. I've had enough. It's the turn of Sarah in Tunbridge. You're through to Sir Keir. Go ahead, Sarah. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. The question I asked is, I couldn't believe how your judgment, in my opinion, and Sue Gray's, was so appalling that you have given an own goal to the cult followers of Johnson. You were considered quite clever by many political journalists, etc., winning back the Red Wall. I just believe what you've done you've come up against, and you know better than I, as you have been up against him very often. I'm going to use all the words I've chosen, please. You have come up against a very malevolent, malicious, malign, malignant, maleficent, a word I just looked up, a mendacious man who will use anything to get out of Partygate.
Why is it an own goal? I promise, get Sir Keir. Why is it an own goal then? The potential appointment of Sue Gray.
Because, as I've just said, the Red Wall, who loved Johnson anyway,
right.
You have given them even more ammunition. And
okay.
when the Daily Mail is saying things like, "Oh, Partygate was a Labour plot," as it happens, I think Sue Gray was unbelievably soft.
Okay.
Gave a soft landing to Johnson.
Okay, I'm not cutting you off. We must get Sir Keir in. Negative headlines in the Daily Mail, I don't necessarily surprise Sir Keir that much each morning, but your reaction to an own goal, Sir Keir?
Sarah, look, I don't think many people take seriously Boris Johnson's suggestion that this is all some kind of plot, that I organised the parties in Downing Street, that I got the booze in, then forced him to go to them. Just look at the photos. I think most people have made their own minds up on that. It does, I think, show how desperate he is. I mean, what I would say, Sarah, is firstly, I am really pleased that really good people want to be part of what we want to do with the Labour government and the change that we want to bring about in this country. And Sue Gray is known for her integrity. She's known for her delivery in government. And those are two things that I think are essential to an incoming Labour government if we get the privilege of being voted in next year. But just, Sarah, I should also say, just to be clear with you and Nick and everybody else, I had absolutely no contact with Sue Gray during the preparation of her report, when she was writing it or anything like that. So the whole suggestion is a complete and utter nonsense, and not for the first time from Boris Johnson. I thought your words were very, very good. I'm not sure I'd get away with all of them, Sarah, but it's a complete nonsense. I think his own party, if you look, it's a dwindling group of people around him that are still supporting him, but the vast majority of
you give no
credence
to the line that possibly some Johnson supporters would say, it was all a put-up job. I know you don't believe that, but you don't give the idea that it would give credence to that.
It's a complete nonsense. Okay. I had no contact at all with Sue during that entire period, as you'd expect.
You will remember in January 2022 last year, you said to me the following words: "Full disclosure, I know Sue Gray personally." When did you first approach Sue Gray to be your Chief of Staff?
Nick, I know her personally. I met her when I was Director of Public Prosecution. She was obviously a senior civil servant. I met a number of them. I was really, really impressed with her. So I've known her personally since then. She's not a friend. I don't mix with her. I'm not in the same social circles or anything like that. I know her personally in the sense that if I saw her at a reception or something, I would go over and have a discussion with her. But as I say, I actually haven't had a discussion with her during the entire time she was doing her report.
Might I ask when you first approached her to be your Chief of Staff?
I've been on the lookout for a Chief of Staff for a little while now. I'm very clear what I wanted in that. And obviously, Sue will set out that, but nothing improper at all. I've been on the lookout for a Chief of Staff. I'm really pleased that people of her calibre are interested in that.
So when did you approach? Can I ask when you approached Sue?
Look,
if I may call her, Sue?
I've been looking for a Chief of Staff for a number of weeks now.
I think October 2022, Sam White left you, if I've got that
Well, that's
correct.
when I lost, when Sam White moved on. At that stage, the first task I had for myself was being clear in my own mind what I wanted from a Chief of Staff, because I was beginning to think about how to deliver.
So I will try again, and obviously you don't have to answer, but when did you first contact Sue Gray about the possibility of becoming your Chief of Staff?
Well, Nick, that's going to be laid out by Sue. She's got to do that as part of her leaving procedure. But there's nothing improper at all.
But you can't tell me that.
Nick, nothing improper at all.
No, but you can't tell me when you first approached her.
I've been looking for a Chief of Staff for a little while now, but Sue will lay that out.
Why won't you tell me, Sir Keir?
There's nothing improper at all.
No. But just interested why you won't tell me when you first made contact with her.
I'm not going to go through lock, stock and barrel, but there's nothing improper. It's not unusual.
But if it's not improper, I'm sorry to... If it's not improper, why won't you say, it was a month ago, Nick, or it was 6 weeks ago, Nick, or it was on New Year's Day?
It was. I've been looking for some time, and there's nothing improper in the slightest.
OK, I'll accept that. Lastly, the business appointment rules for Crown servants say officials should not accept or announce a new appointment or offer of employment before it's been approved. But she has accepted your job.
No, we haven't agreed anything yet. I mean, I want her to be my Chief of Staff. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But of course we haven't agreed terms. Of course we haven't.
OK. Sarah, thank you for your call. Rashid in Caterham. Rashid, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Keir.
Hi, Rashid in Caterham, close to where I grew up. In Oxted.
Yes,
we're going to hear about the field and the donkeys any minute now. On you go, Rashid.
And probably the cars. I wanted to ask you, Sir Keir, about Rupert Huck, the MP that you removed the whip from a few months ago, I think about 5 months ago or so, and you've now returned it to her. I want to know, why have you done that? This is a lady who talked about Kwasi Kwarteng, who's, I think, I'm not sure if it's Chancellor then, but anyway, she spoke about him, about his education, the way he speaks, that he wasn't, and then he went further to say that he wasn't a proper word to that effect. A proper.
Let me just help you, Rashid. This is Ms. Huck speaking of then Chancellor. He went to Eton. I think he went to a very expensive prep school all the way through, the top schools in the country. If you hear him on the radio, you wouldn't know he is black. To your question, if you would, Rashid, as to why she's back in the party fold. Is that it, sir?
Yes. Why is she back in the party? Considering some of the things that she's said are at the heart of racism. Because, one of the things that I'm a person of African background myself. One of the things that we often get is that you need to know your place. You need to know where you are. And what she said is exactly that.
Let's put that to Sakir.
Yeah, Rashid, thank you for raising this. What she said was completely wrong, completely unacceptable, and that's why the party whip was removed from her straight away. What happens after that, Rashid, is there's then an investigation. She's asked to explain. She has accepted that it was completely wrong. She's apologised that it's completely wrong. And then the question becomes, after that process, her accepting the wrongdoing, what's the proportionate thing to do? Is it to remove the whip forever, or is it to say, well, you've recognised this was wrong, you must never ever do it again, but on this occasion you can have the whip back? And that's what we've done in her case. But Rashid, I'm not going to shy away from the fact that what she said was absolutely wrong, and that's why the whip was removed in the first place. And the point you make is a very good point about how these things are said in the broader context, Rashid.
You're confident, lastly, Sakir, she has learnt from this and
yes,
moved on?
I am confident of that.
She's reached the level to satisfy you as her party leader?
Yeah, well, there was an investigation, but yes, that's right, Nick.
OK. Thanks for that, Rashid. I have to ask you, another of your colleagues, Neil Coyle, has been suspended from the House of Commons for 5 days after reports of drunken abuse and racist comments. We understand Mr Coyle is involved in foul-mouthed and drunken abuse towards a junior parliamentary assistant. Will he be allowed back in? What's the process now for Mr Coyle?
Well, that'll be a matter for the Chief Whip. I think there's still some way to go with Neil Coyle, but that'll be a matter for the Chief Whip. OK, so we can't comment on all that. But one person who won't be allowed back in is Jeremy Corbyn? Yep.
He can't learn from his experience in the way that Rupert Huck has learnt from hers?
He won't stand as a Labour candidate at the next election. I took the decision after his response to the Equality and Human Rights Commission that his failure to even really properly acknowledge the findings and what he said in the response afterwards was totally incompatible with the change that I was bringing about in the Labour Party. We have changed the Labour Party, Nick. We needed to change the Labour Party after the dreadful defeat in 2019, and we're not going back.
So to clarify, if you acknowledge some of your transgression and try and put it right, as Rupert Huck did, that is some of the battle.
Yes, so
Okay.
it depends. I mean, I'm not going to pretend what Rupert said was acceptable in any way, but she has accepted that. She has been very clear that she accepts that. And then there is a difficult decision, Nick, in every case, which is it proportionate to sort of say, well, I'm afraid you're never getting the whip back, or when someone's gone through what she's gone through, well, you can. But with Jeremy Corbyn, it's a different matter. He will not stand as a Labour candidate at the next election. We have changed the Labour Party and we're not going back.
I think we have a question coming up from Simon in Wandsworth about another Labour politician. Simon, you've got a question on the Mayor, is that correct? Good morning, sir.
Well, it's on the Mayor and you, Elisa. Good morning, Sir Keir.
Hi, Simon.
Good morning. My question is what is your view about ULEZ and its proposed extension, in particular in light of suggestions that votes in the consultation process against extension were suppressed, and even more particularly in the light of the Mayor of London's comments last week in Ealing at a public meeting that objectors to the ULEZ extension were, I think in words of along the lines of right-wing extremists,
Yes.
COVID vaccine deniers and Brexit deniers.
Simon, I'm just going to clarify.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, so it's because somebody, but just briefly, because, I mean, Sir Keir has a national brief, so just to remind him, I'm sure he's aware there was a People's Question event at Ealing Town Hall on Thursday. London Mayor Sadiq Khan described people such as yourself, anti-ULEZ protesters, as being far-right, Tories or COVID deniers. Do you support that language, Sir Keir?
Well, look, I would not speak in that way, Simon. And let me, Simon, straight away recognise I do know there are people with real concerns about the ULEZ scheme. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I do think we've got to deal with air pollution. It is a real problem in London and affects young people in particular. So we have to do something about it. Whenever you make a change, there is always cause for concern. But, Simon, I accept there is that concern. But I have to say I support the scheme because I do think in the end we've got to
without any delay, because there are some London Labour MPs who are saying what you've just said, we need clean air, but delay it because the cost of living, couldn't be a worse time for a plumber to get a new van.
I think it's right for the Mayor to take on board the concerns that people are expressing, but there's always a reason not to make change, Nick, and this is a serious issue. I think I would probably go further in this respect. We do need to go electric in the end with our vehicles. We all know that. And there is going to be the phasing out of diesel and petrol. So the sooner we get there, the better. The problem, obviously, and this will be particularly for those working or using vans and things, it's very expensive to buy up front. What we've suggested as the Labour Party is let's do it, therefore, over 10 years. If you take 10 years' worth of a van or a car electric, it's much cheaper because the cost of the electricity is very, very much less than petrol and diesel. So we've got a scheme to say swap now to electric, and if it was a Labour government, you would have 10 years to pay it in instalments over the 10 years, which would in fact be cheaper in the long run because we're going to have to make the transition. We can't put it off forever, but we've got to recognise that for many working people, it's too big a lump sum to pay up front.
But would you still go ahead with the ULEZ expansion in August in London?
I mean, that'll be a matter for the Mayor, but I think he's right. I would take on board the concerns, but I do think we've got to go ahead with it.
Simon, thank you for your call.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you. Olivia is in Bath. Olivia, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Hiya, hi.
Hi, Olivia.
Thanks for taking the question. So, as a Labour Party member, I'm just curious. I know there's a lot of stuff that will need funding once Labour hopefully take power at the next election, but are there any plans to increase our defence budget, especially considering current tensions, and it's been, I think, cut over the last decade or so?
Well, Olivia, obviously an incoming Labour government needs to take defence very seriously. And that's among the reasons that we've been absolutely united with the government when it comes to things like Ukraine, making it clear that there's no party politics in supporting Ukraine. On the budget, we've said, the defence budget in particular, we've said that we support it staying at 2.5%. I will wait and see, obviously, what the government come up with in this budget. But Olivia, is one area where we would take a very different approach to the government, and that is the mismanagement. We have figures to back up the fact that £15 billion has been wasted since 2010 on mismanagement in the defence budget. Now, that's on top of all the waste we saw on some of the procurement in other areas of government. This government waste has got to be tackled.
And we will put wasted on? That's a vast amount of money.
On contracts that haven't delivered, on all sorts of projects that haven't gone anywhere. And I'm more than happy to provide the detail on that because that is, it's one thing to argue about what the defence budget should be, quite rightly, but it's another for the public. We've had a really tough decade of cuts, of austerity, most people's living standards going down. And when they find out there's waste of that scale, people get really frustrated, and quite right too.
OK, you can provide. I don't expect you to have it to your hand.
No,
you'll get some details.
Yeah, of course.
OK, because that's something I think we'd want to revisit. Olivia, thank you for the question. Can I throw in a question as a journalist? In your view, Sir Keir, was the journalist and author Isabel Oakeshott right to leak Mr Hancock's WhatsApp messages?
Oh, who to choose? Matt Hancock or Isabel Oakeshott? Look, I think it's... I think it's very hard for her to justify all of what has come out as in the public interest. But on the other hand, it is incredibly illuminating. I have to say, the idea of Matt Hancock taking his phone out with 3 years' worth of WhatsApps, hundreds of thousands of WhatsApp, and handing it to a journalist and effectively saying, well, use the good bits in my book, but don't look at anything else. I mean, how naive can you be? But, as between...
What did you learn about I assume you read it or read a précis. A précis was prepared for you.
I've read a lot of it. I mean,
you've read it all the time.
Yeah.
What did you take from it?
The chaotic way in which they were running the government. You'd expect some of these decisions to be in proper meetings, thrashed out, proper decisions recorded, and there's stuff pinging around on WhatsApp. The the self-aggrandisement of Matt Hancock. It's all about him. And some of the decisions that were taken appear to be taken on the basis of sort of quite minor political issues rather than the major issues of the day.
Would you publish?
I think most people would be really, would look at this and think this was a pretty chaotic way to run the country.
Would you publish your WhatsApp messages through the pandemic?
No, I wouldn't.
Would you give me your mobile phone and help you write a book?
Nick, have a look. But I don't know what Matt Hancock was thinking in handing all that over, but all he's done is shown a torch on himself and others. I imagine that others that were working with him will be pretty angry with him that everything they've ever said to him is now put by him effectively into the public domain.
Dinesh is in Oxford. Dinesh, your question to Sir Keir.
Yeah. Hi. Good morning.
Hi, Dinesh.
Hi. Good morning, Sir Keir. It's a privilege being on the call on the radio with you, and thank you, Nick, for taking my call.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your question. What is it today? Thank you.
My question is, Sir Keir, I would like to hear your opinion on the Wakefield incident at the school. Personally, I think it's disgraceful and disgusting for a country like UK, and the poor mother was on apologising. It's just disgusting, and I take somebody like Suella Braverman to come out with a statement. I just want to understand your view on this. Thank you.
This is just to remind listeners, I'm sure Sir Keir is across it, this is, better put a reportedly in here, at a high school in Wakefield, a copy of the Quran was dropped by one boy. It appears that the cover has been scuffed, some inside pages have been in some way damaged. 4 boys were subsequently, 13, 14-year-old boys were subsequently suspended. It was recorded as a non-crime hate incident by West Yorkshire Police, and now there have been threats on the boy who brought in, reportedly threats on the life of the boy who brought in the Quran. Sir Keir knew all of that. I'm just bringing listeners up to speed.
Yeah, on what you've said, Nick, there's obviously a real concern. I have to say, I don't know the details. There's very often details which we don't necessarily know. I don't know what they are, to be honest. But from what you've said, there's obviously a concern about what's happened.
What do we need to learn from this? Is it a non-crime hate incident to drop a copy of a religious text?
I don't think dropping a copy of any text is a hate crime.
Bunch of 14-year-old boys. You were one once, obviously.
I was one once. I've got one now. And if it was some sort of crime to drop something, we'd have a long criminal record in our family, that's for sure. No, dropping something can't be a criminal offence. It's an accident, etc. Hate crime is a real issue out there in many, many communities. So I don't diminish the importance of hate crime. But honestly, on the Wakefield, I'm just stressed. I'm not across the details.
Wants a police review into the way these are recorded. Would that gain your support?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the police are under a huge amount of pressure as it is. And I think if you ask people in Wakefield, would you rather have more police officers on the beat around you in your communities as community police officers, or reviewing this? I think you'd only get one answer.
Last couple of minutes, let's go to Amy in Derby. Amy, your question.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Amy.
Go ahead, Amy.
Hello. I want to ask, I'm a single mother. I have one child, and I'm on benefit. I was just wondering, if you ever do get into power, which, praying to God that you do, how would you help people like me that are on benefits, that are struggling, like really, really struggling to get by? Like, I got paid a couple of days ago. I have £50 left after paying all my bills, after paying all my debts, after paying everything.
Do you mind my asking, this is Nick talking, by the way, you don't have to answer. Do you mind my asking what you get per week or month? You don't have to answer this question.
No, it's fine. I'm open about things like this.
Okay.
So every month I get £1,075.
£1,075.
No, 79, sorry, that's my mistake.
Okay.
550 of that is for my rent.
I'm sure, yeah. And
then I put on 50 for my gas.
Yeah.
Because my electric now, but it ends in March. You get that. I think it's some money from the government now, so that goes on to my electric.
So you've got about 300 a month to get through with you and your child, broadly speaking.
And these are not all the bills. I've got £100 on my council tax. I've got £100 on my shopping.
Good God. Right, my goodness, you're left with a little over 150 quid. So, Keir.
Yeah, Amy, firstly, thank you for sharing that with us, because I think it's very important that we all know just how tough it is for many people, including yourself, at the moment. In terms of what we would do, Amy, the answer is deal with the short term. And so things like energy bills, we've got to deal with. They're about to go up again. You won't be pleased to hear that. The government's going to have to deal with it. And I think that the oil and gas companies that are making a huge amount of money at the moment, profits they didn't expect to make, should pay their fair share. I also think we should change childcare so that there is cheaper, better childcare for you so that you can perhaps work more hours. I know that's a real inhibitor for so many people. But we've also got to do the long term, Amy, because one of my frustrations about this government is that we've had what I call sticking plaster politics for 10 years or more, where we fix the immediate problem, but we don't actually fix the fundamentals. And I want to fix the fundamentals. And that means that we have got to grow our economy. We've got to have an economy that actually pushes up living standards everywhere across the country. That's why I've said I want a mission-driven Labour government. Nick was less than enthusiastic about some of the language I use, but actually the idea, Amy, is that we can't...
New delivery-focused cross-cutting machine boards.
We can't...
Mission boards, I don't know, is that like a cheese board?
The idea, Nick, is really important, and Amy, it'll be important for you. We need to fix the immediate problem, your bills or whatever it is now, but we also need to have a better answer for you, which is after 5 years of Labour government, Amy, I want you to be better off. I want your living standards to be better off. I want your child to have the best opportunity a child can have to do whatever he or she wants to do with their lives. And that does mean fixing the fundamentals. And so, Amy, yours is such a good example of why we need to make the sort of change that I hope we can have with an incoming Labour government if we're privileged enough to be voted in next year. But, you know, no complacency from me. We've got to earn every vote, Amy, including yours.
Amy, thanks for your candour. Last minute or two together. A couple of questions from me. How should British politics remember Nicola Sturgeon?
I think we should start by paying tribute to the fact that she's led her country and her party for 8 years. That is a tough job. I think it is very tough for anyone. I think it's particularly tough for women at the top. And so I would actually pay tribute and wish her well in whatever she does next. I think in the end, she's led Scotland into a cul-de-sac when it comes to independence. And the SNP have run out of road. And you've seen that now. They haven't got any real calibre in their candidates for leadership. And I think the argument I need to make in those circumstances that the change Scotland needs isn't just who's the next leader of the SNP. It's actually a more fundamental change, which is a change from the SNP to Labour, a changed and better Scotland in a changed and better United Kingdom. It's the argument we've got to make. I mean, there are some people who think that because Nicola Sturgeon has gone, that automatically means that any disaffected, disorientated voters don't go move from the SNP to perhaps Labour. I don't subscribe to that. I know that in Scotland, as everywhere, every single vote has to be earned. We just have to make our argument and try to earn those votes.
Your reaction to the possibility Boris Johnson may nominate his father for a knighthood in his resignation? I'm sure you've seen it, or your team has made you aware of that front page story in the Times.
I checked with the team on this. So the idea that Boris Johnson is nominating his dad for a knighthood, you only need to say it to realise just how ridiculous it is. It's classic of a man who... like Johnson. I mean, I think the public would just think this is absolutely outrageous. I mean, Stanley, by the way, used to be a constituent of mine. So I know Stanley. Nothing personal against Stanley, but the idea of an ex-Prime Minister bestowing honours on his dad for services to what?
It's... My listeners have had some suggestions, but I'll leave those on there. One last try. Did you make contact with Sue Gray about joining you as Chief of Staff this year or last year?
Nick, it was recent. It was after I'd lost, or we moved on from my last Chief of Staff,
October.
and after I've also had a period of working through in my own mind what I wanted from a Chief of Staff.
But you're not going to tell me when?
Nick, that'll all be
All right.
later, but there's absolutely nothing improper about this whatsoever.
We're talking about your potential stewardship of the country. Lastly, yesterday, I understand you skippered your team to a rather big defeat. Is that correct? And there's what's it like to wake up, see pictures? There's Mo Salah banging in the goals, and there's you, respectfully, and I wouldn't be able to either, struggling to make a left foot volley, I think.
Yeah, well, Nick, I saw there was a photographer down where I play football
What was the
yesterday.
score?
We lost by 2 goals. I think the report might say 3, but we lost. I don't like losing. I would just like to put on record, I did actually score a penalty, and I was surprised not to see the picture of me wheeling away in victory, but instead we got a less flattering picture.
We do.
Instead, Kel Sapri.
I would have split the front page, you and Mo Salah. There we are. Did you wheel away like that, the front page of your mirror with your shirt?
I'll tell you what, I did wheel away from Arsenal on Saturday. I was there when we won 3-2 against Bournemouth in the last minute. It was, you don't get many games like that in
One
a
hand
lifetime.
on the trophy?
I hope so. But I mean, as a lifelong fan, you endure a lot, but a game like that is worth the many hundreds of that don't go so well.
Good seeing you. Thanks for the wide range of subjects. Sir Keir Starmer appearing here on LBC. Let's give you the latest news.
Sir Keir Starmer has told Nick that questions about Sue Gray's integrity show how desperate Boris Johnson is. The former senior civil servant is joining the Labour leader's team. Allies of the former Prime Minister say it shows Partygate was a plot to oust him. Sir Keir has rejected government plans to tackle migrant crossings of the English Channel.